I never thought I'd be the type of woman who would dedicate an entire year of her life to revenge. Revenge was for movie villains, for people with too much time on their hands, for the emotionally unstable. Not for me, a high school English teacher with a mortgage, a golden retriever named Hemingway, and what I had once believed was a happy marriage. But that was before I heard my husband's mistress call me fat. It was a Tuesday evening in October when my life imploded. The kind of crisp fall day where the leaves crunch satisfyingly under your boots and the air smells like possibility. I remember thinking that morning how perfect everything was, how lucky I felt to have my life, my career, my husband Michael. 12 years of marriage, and I still enjoyed bringing him coffee in bed on my days off. That particular Tuesday, I'd left school early. A surprise for Michael. I'd pick up ingredients for his favorite meal, maybe open a bottle of wine, reconnect in the middle of the week when we were usually both too tired to do more than collapse on the couch with takeout. Our intimacy had been waning lately. I blamed it on our schedules, on the general malaise of midlife. Nothing that couldn't be fixed with a little effort. I pulled into our driveway at 3:30 p.m., noticing a car I didn't recognize parked on the street in front of our house. A sleek black Audi that looked expensive and out of place in our modest neighborhood. A colleague of Michael's, perhaps? He worked from home on Tuesdays. The front door was unlocked, which wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the sound of laughter coming from upstairs. A woman's laughter. Light and tinkling like expensive wind chimes. I know now that I should have made my presence known. Should have called out, "Honey, I'm home early." Should have given them time to straighten their clothes, to wipe away the evidence of their betrayal. But something primal in me kept my footsteps silent as I climbed the stairs, my heart pounding so violently I was sure they would hear it through the walls. Our bedroom door was ajar. Just enough for me to see them tangled in our sheets, the sheets I had washed just 2 days ago, the sheets we had received as a wedding present from my grandmother, the sheets embroidered with our initials in the corner. Michael's back was to me, his shoulders bare above the rumpled cotton. And facing me, her chin resting on his shoulder, with cascading blonde hair and sharp features that might be considered beautiful if they weren't twisted in a smile of such smug satisfaction, was a woman I'd never seen before. I must have made a sound, a gasp, a whimper, something, because Michael suddenly turned. His face, the face I had loved for 14 years, transformed from pleasure to horror in an instant. "Claire," he said, my name like a stone dropping from his lips. What happened next is a blur of images and sensations. Michael scrambling from the bed, grabbing for his boxers. The woman pulling the sheet up to her chin, her eyes wide with surprise but not, I noted with a stab of additional pain, with shame. "Claire, I can explain," Michael was saying, his voice coming from somewhere far away. I remember backing up, my hand reaching blindly for the hallway wall to steady myself. I remember the roaring in my ears, the sudden dryness of my mouth, and I remember thinking, absurdly, that I was still holding the reusable grocery bags I'd planned to take to the store. "How long?" I asked, my voice so calm it frightened even me. Michael was fumbling for words, for excuses, for lies. But the woman, she was watching me with something like clinical interest, assessing me. "You should go," Michael said to her, not looking away from me. "Please, is this your wife?" she asked, her voice higher than I expected, almost childlike in its pitch. She didn't wait for an answer. Instead, she looked me up and down, from my sensible shoes to my unwashed hair, and gave a little scoff that would echo in my mind for months to come. I don't get it," she said to Michael as if I wasn't even there. "You described her as, I just thought she'd be different." Michael had the decency to look mortified. "Ava, please." So her name was Ava. I filed that away, a piece of information I didn't yet know I would use. Ava continued, leaning back against our headboard with casual disregard for the devastation she was causing. "You didn't tell me she was, She gestured vaguely at my body with a flick of her wrist. Fat. The word landed like a slap. Not because it was untrue. I had put on weight over the years, especially after my mother's death 2 years ago. Grief had manifested as midnight ice cream and missed workouts. I carried perhaps 40 pounds more than I had on my wedding day. But to hear it spoken so dismissively, so cruelly, by this woman in my bed, wearing nothing but my husband's betrayal, it crystallized something in me. I looked at Michael, waiting for him to defend me, to tell this woman to shut her mouth, to show some sign that the last 12 years had meant something. Instead, he looked away, his face flushed with shame. Not shame for his actions, I realized, but shame for me. for having chosen me in the first place. And that's when I knew that whatever we had was not just broken, it was annihilated. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I simply turned and walked downstairs, out the front door, and into my car. I drove to a hotel, checked in with mechanical precision, and sat on the edge of the bed staring at the wall until the room grew dark around me. Michael called 23 times that night. I let each call go to voicemail. When the phone finally stopped ringing, I listened to the messages one by one. "Claire, please come home. We need to talk about this." "It's not what you think. I made a mistake. I love you. Please." The last one, left at 2:17 a.m., I don't know what else to say. "I'm sorry. I'll sleep on the couch. Just come home." I deleted them all and turned off my phone. The next morning, I called in sick to work, something I almost never did. I sat in the hotel bathroom, staring at myself in the unforgiving fluorescent light. I looked at my body critically, seeing it through Ava's eyes, the softness around my middle, the fullness in my face that hadn't been there a decade ago. I wasn't obese, but I was definitely overweight. The realization didn't devastate me as much as I thought it might. It was simply a fact, like having brown hair or being 5'6". What devastated me was realizing I had spent years thinking Michael loved me regardless of these changes. That the vows we'd spoken, for better or worse, had actually meant something to him. I turned on my phone briefly to call my best friend, Natalie. "I need a favor," I said when she answered. "Can you go to my house when you know Michael will be at work and pack me a suitcase? Just the basics. I'll text you when he's gone." "Claire, what's happening? Are you okay?" "No," I said simply. "I'm not. I'll explain everything, but right now I just need clothes." Natalie, bless her, didn't push. "Of course. Whatever you need." I spent that day in a daze, moving through the world like a ghost. I extended my hotel stay for a week. I spoke to my department head at school and requested emergency personal leave, citing a family crisis. I opened a new checking account and transferred half of our joint savings into it. I contacted a divorce attorney and made an appointment for the following week. Each action was like moving through molasses, every decision requiring energy I didn't have. But I kept going, driven by a strange, detached determination that I didn't recognize in myself. When Natalie dropped off my clothes, I told her everything. We sat on the hotel bed, and I recounted the scene with a bizarre calm that occasionally broke into gasping sobs. "That bitch," Natalie said when I told her what Ava had said. "And Michael? He just stood there?" I nodded, fresh tears spilling. "He couldn't even look at me." "I'll kill him," Natalie said, wrapping her arms around me. "I swear to God, Claire, I will murder that man and bury him in my backyard." Despite everything, I laughed. "Your yard is too small. The neighbors would notice." "Then I'll dissolve him in acid like on Breaking Bad. Your chemistry knowledge is limited to mixing cocktails." "I'll push him off a cliff." "There are no cliffs in Illinois." We went back and forth like this until we were both laughing through tears, the absurdity of humor in the midst of heartbreak somehow making it all more bearable. "What are you going to do?" Natalie finally asked. I sighed, staring at the bland hotel artwork on the wall. "Get divorced, obviously." "And after that?" I thought about Ava's smirk, about Michael's silence, about the casual cruelty of it all. "I don't know," I said honestly. But even as I said it, something was taking root inside me, something I wasn't ready to name yet. Michael finally stopped calling after 3 days. On the 4th day, I received a text. "I'm staying with Jason. When you're ready to talk, I'll be here." "I'm so sorry, Claire." Jason was his college roommate, still single, living in a downtown condo that I'd always found too sterile, too impersonal. I pictured Michael there, sleeping on Jason's expensive leather couch, commiserating over craft beers. Poor Michael, with his inconvenient wife who had the audacity to walk in on his affair. I didn't reply. A week turned into 2. I found a small furnished apartment with a month-to-month lease, not too far from my school. I returned to teaching, putting on a professional face that felt like a mask. My students noticed nothing amiss. The beauty of teenagers is their self-absorption, their inability to see beyond their own dramas. I saw my lawyer, started the divorce proceedings. I agreed to let Michael come to the house while I was at work to collect his personal belongings. I changed the locks afterward. Through all of this, I functioned. I graded papers. I fed Hemingway, whom I'd brought to my new apartment. I paid bills. I even managed to smile occasionally when something genuinely amused me. But inside, I felt hollow, as if all my vital organs had been scooped out, leaving nothing but an empty shell that moved through the motions of life. And underneath that hollowness, nearly imperceptible at first, was something else, a small hot coal of anger that refused to be extinguished. 3 weeks after Discovery Day, I stood in the cereal aisle at the grocery store, staring blankly at the rows of colorful boxes, unable to make a simple decision about breakfast food. A woman reached past me for a box of Special K, and I automatically stepped aside to give her space. "Thanks," she said with a smile. "Sorry to reach around you. I'm trying to lose these last 10 pregnancy pounds." She gestured ruefully at her body, which to my eyes looked perfectly normal. "How old is your baby?" I asked, making polite conversation. 4 months, she said proudly, pulling out her phone to show me pictures of a chubby-cheeked infant. "This is Noah. He's beautiful," I said, meaning it. "Congratulations." "Thanks." She slipped her phone back into her purse. "The sleepless nights are worth it, but the body changes are tough. My husband says he doesn't notice, but—" She trailed off with a self-deprecating shrug. I felt a surge of something bitter. "You grew an entire human being," I said, more sharply than I intended. "Your body did something miraculous. It's not a crime that it shows evidence of that." The woman blinked, startled by my intensity. "You're right." "Thank you." As she walked away, I stood there, the realization crashing over me like a wave. I had spent years apologizing for my body. Not explicitly, but in 100 small ways. The self-deprecating jokes. The clothes chosen to hide rather than flatter. The way I'd turn away from Michael when changing, a habit that had developed so gradually I hadn't even noticed. And Michael had never once said, "Stop. I love your body exactly as it is." Because he didn't. I abandoned my shopping cart where it stood and walked out of the store. In my car, I pulled down the sun visor and looked at myself in the small mirror. "You don't have to be sorry," I said to my reflection, my voice steady. "But you do have to decide what happens next." That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my small apartment, mind racing with half-formed thoughts and emotions. At 2 a.m., I opened my laptop and started researching weight loss methods, exercise programs, nutrition plans. I read about sustainable changes versus crash diets, about the psychology of transformation, about the health benefits of losing excess weight. By morning, I had a plan. Not just for weight loss, but for something larger. Something that had been crystallizing in me since the moment I'd heard Ava's casual, cutting remark. I was going to get healthy. I was going to get strong. I was going to rebuild myself from the inside out. And then, when I was ready, I was going to make Ava regret ever speaking my name. The first day of my new life dawned cold and clear. November in Chicago is unforgiving, but I laced up the running shoes I'd bought the evening before and stepped outside at 5:30 a.m., determined to start as I meant to go on. I made it exactly half a mile before I had to stop, hands on my knees, lungs burning, convinced I was having a cardiac event. A jogger passed me, concern on her face. "You okay?" I waved her on, unable to spare the breath for words. When I could finally stand upright, I walked home, humiliated and furious with my body for betraying me. But the next morning, I was out there again. And the next? On the 4th day, I made it 7/10 of a mile. By the end of the week, I could jog slowly for a full mile without stopping. Small victories. I changed my diet completely. Out went the comfort foods, the takeout, the mindless snacking. In came lean proteins, vegetables, complex carbohydrates. I measured portions. I counted calories without becoming obsessive. I drank water until I thought I might float away. I joined a gym closer to my new apartment than to the house Michael and I had shared. I didn't want to risk running into anyone from my old life. Not yet. Not until I was ready. The first time I walked into the weight room, I nearly turned around and walked right back out. It was dominated by men, most of them young and fit, grunting and posturing in a display of testosterone that made me acutely aware of my softer, weaker body. But I forced myself to find an unoccupied corner, to set up with the lightest dumbbells available, and to begin the routine I'd researched. My arms shook. My form was terrible. I caught glimpses of myself in the wall mirrors and winced at how awkward I looked. But I kept going. A trainer approached me halfway through. I tensed, waiting for the sales pitch, the subtle suggestion that I needed professional help to avoid embarrassing myself. "Mind if I make a quick suggestion?" he asked. He was younger than me by at least a decade, with the easy physical confidence of someone who had never questioned his right to take up space. "Sure," I said, bracing myself. "Your elbow should be directly under your shoulder for that plank. Like this." He demonstrated on the mat next to me. "You'll get more core activation and protect your lower back." I adjusted my position, feeling the difference immediately. "Better," he said with a professional nod. Keep it up. He moved on to help someone else. No sales pitch, no judgment. Just a simple correction offered respectfully. I finished my workout with slightly more confidence. December arrived, bringing with it all the holiday triggers I'd been dreading. Christmas music in every store. Festive foods appearing in the teacher's lounge. Memories of holidays past with Michael, decorating our tree, exchanging gifts, making love on Christmas Eve after returning from his parents' annual dinner. Natalie invited me to her family's Christmas celebration, but I declined. I needed this first holiday post-betrayal to be on my own terms. I volunteered to serve meals at a shelter on Christmas Day. The work kept my hands busy and my mind focused on something other than my loss. By January, I had lost 15 pounds. My clothes were looser, my face slightly more defined. People at school had started to notice, offering compliments that I accepted with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. They assumed my weight loss was the typical result of divorce stress. No one suspected it was deliberate, purposeful. I had stopped crying myself to sleep every night. The hollow feeling was still there, but it was gradually being filled with something new, determination. With every early morning run, every carefully prepared meal, every weight training session that left my muscles trembling with fatigue, I was reclaiming pieces of myself. The divorce proceedings moved forward. Michael and I communicated through our lawyers. He wanted to meet in person. I refused. He asked if there was any chance of reconciliation. I instructed my lawyer to make it clear there was not. He didn't fight me on the division of assets. Half of everything, clean and simple. 12 years reduced to columns on a spreadsheet. In February, I increased my workout intensity. I hired that same trainer, his name was Derek, for 1 session a week, focusing on strength training. I told him I wanted to be strong, not just thin. He created a program that challenged me, that pushed me to my limits and then slightly beyond them. "You're a natural at this," he said one day as I completed a set of deadlifts, more weight on the bar than I'd ever thought I could handle. "No, I'm not," I replied, wiping sweat from my forehead. "But I'm determined." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Sometimes that's better." By March, I had lost 25 pounds. My body was changing in ways that surprised me. I had muscle definition in my arms. My legs were stronger, more shapely. I could run 3 miles without stopping. More importantly, I was sleeping better. The crushing anxiety that had been my constant companion in the early days had subsided to a manageable level. I still had moments of searing anger, of bone-deep sadness, but they were less frequent, less debilitating. I found myself enjoying small pleasures again. The taste of fresh berries, the feel of spring sunshine on my face, the satisfaction of completing a challenging workout, Hemingway's enthusiastic greeting when I returned home each day. In April, I ran my first 5K race. Natalie came to cheer me on, holding a sign that read, "Claire's Comeback Tour." I finished in the middle of the pack, which felt like a victory. Afterward, sweaty and exhilarated, I hugged her tightly. "I'm proud of you," she said, and I could tell she meant it. "I'm starting to be proud of me, too," I replied. That night, soaking in a hot bath to ease my sore muscles, I allowed myself to think about Michael for the first time in weeks. Our divorce had been finalized in March. He had moved permanently into a condo downtown. We had divided our friends like assets, some choosing him, some choosing me, some attempting an awkward neutrality that pleased no one. I wondered if he knew about my transformation. Chicago was a big city, but we had mutual acquaintances. Surely someone had mentioned it to him. I wondered if he regretted his choices, if he missed me, if he ever thought about what might have been. I realized with a start that I didn't actually care about the answers to these questions. Michael's feelings had ceased to be the center of my emotional universe. He had become peripheral, a character in the previous chapter of my life rather than the current one. What I did care about, what still burned inside me like a pilot light that refused to be extinguished, was the memory of Ava's voice, her casual cruelty. The way she had reduced me to a single dismissive word. Fat. I hadn't seen her since that day, hadn't tried to find out anything about her. But as I lay in the cooling bath water, I knew it was time to change that. The next day, I did something I'd been avoiding for months. I looked at Michael's social media accounts. We were no longer connected online. I had blocked him in those first raw days, but his profiles were public. I steeled myself for what I might find. Pictures of him with Ava, perhaps. Evidence that they were now a couple, living the life he had once promised to me. Instead, I found nothing. No updates since before our separation. His last post was from September, a benign photo of him at a work conference, smiling with colleagues, nothing to indicate the implosion of his personal life that would occur just weeks later. Curious, I searched for Ava. I had her first name and a clear mental image of her face, but Chicago was full of blonde women named Ava. Without a last name, I was searching blindly. I tried combinations. Ava Michael Thompson Chicago, using my ex-husband's full name. Nothing conclusive. I searched through Michael's friends list, scrolling through dozens of avatars, looking for her face. Nothing. Then I remembered something. The black Audi parked in front of our house. A detail from that horrible day that had been seared into my memory. I went back through Michael's photos, looking for any company events, any group pictures where she might appear. And there, in a post from last July, I found what I was looking for. A company picnic, Michael with his arm around my shoulders, smiling at the camera. And in the background, slightly blurred but unmistakable, Ava. She was talking to someone else, her profile to the camera, but it was definitely her. I zoomed in as much as the resolution would allow. She was wearing a company t-shirt, the same as everyone else in the picture. She worked with Michael. Had probably been working with him when they began their affair. Armed with this information, I searched the website of Michael's company, a mid-sized architectural firm where he had been a project manager for the last 8 years. I scanned the Our Team page, scrolling through headshots until there she was. Ava Mercer, interior design specialist. I stared at her professional photo. She looked exactly as I remembered. Blonde, sharp-featured, conventionally attractive in a way that I had never been, even at my fittest. Her company bio was brief but informative. She had joined the firm 2 years ago, had previously worked in New York, specialized in commercial spaces. Now I had a name, a full name. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the keyboard. What I was about to do felt like crossing a line. Up until now, my journey had been about me, my healing, my transformation, my reclaiming of self. Did I really want to shift focus to her? The memory of her voice floated back to me. You didn't tell me she was fat. Yes, I did. I typed Ava Mercer Chicago into the search bar and pressed enter. The results flooded my screen. Social media profiles, professional networking pages, a feature in a local design magazine from last year, and most interestingly, an event listing for an upcoming charity gala where she was on the organizing committee. The Spring Soirée for Arts Education. 2 weeks away at the Grand Wellington Hotel downtown. Tickets were $250 per person, with proceeds benefiting arts programs in Chicago public schools. I stared at the event page, my heart racing. This was it. The opportunity I hadn't realized I'd been waiting for. I bought a ticket immediately, maxing out the new credit card I'd gotten after the separation. It was extravagant, foolish even, given my new financial reality. But I didn't care. This wasn't about money. This was about something far more valuable. For the next 2 weeks, I intensified my efforts. I worked out twice a day. I was meticulous about my nutrition. I researched intermittent fasting and incorporated it into my routine. I drank gallons of water. I got more sleep. I did everything I could to accelerate my already significant progress. I also went shopping. The charity gala called for formal attire, and I had nothing suitable in my new size. I had been living in workout clothes and the increasingly loose wardrobe from my previous life, reluctant to spend money on new clothes when my body was changing so rapidly. But for this, I needed to look spectacular. Natalie went with me to an upscale department store where I tried on dozens of dresses. Each one I rejected for various reasons. Too matronly, too youthful, too safe, too wild. Finally, nearly ready to give up, I slipped into a midnight blue gown with a subtle shimmer. It hugged my newly defined curves, accentuating my smaller waist and the muscle tone in my arms and back. The neckline was lower than I would have chosen before, but now it felt right, confident, unapologetic. I stepped out of the dressing room and Natalie's eyes widened. Holy shit, Claire. Too much? I asked, suddenly uncertain. No, she said, shaking her head slowly. It's perfect. You look... She trailed off, searching for the right word. Dangerous. I turned to look in the three-way mirror, and for the first time in months I really saw myself. Not just the physical changes, although those were dramatic. I'd lost nearly 40 pounds by then, transforming my body from soft and rounded to lean and strong. But it was more than that. There was a hardness in my eyes, a set to my jaw that hadn't been there before. I looked like someone who had been broken and had reassembled herself with edges intentionally left sharp. Dangerous. Yes, that was exactly what I wanted to be. I bought the dress. And shoes. High, strappy sandals that I would have considered impractical before but now felt like armor. And jewelry. Simple but elegant pieces that complemented rather than competed with the dress. And makeup, including a red lipstick bolder than anything I'd worn before. The night of the gala, I spent hours getting ready. I did my hair in loose waves, more sophisticated than my usual ponytail or simple bun. I applied my makeup with precision, following tutorials I'd studied online. When I finally stepped back to assess the complete effect, I barely recognized myself. Good. I didn't want to be recognizable. Not to Ava, who had seen me at my lowest point, and certainly not to myself. I took an Uber to the Grand Wellington, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. As the car pulled up to the ornate entrance, I had a moment of panic. What was I doing? What did I hope to accomplish with this confrontation? Was I really going to walk into a charity event with the sole purpose of, what? Making Ava Mercer uncomfortable? Showing off my weight loss? It seemed suddenly childish, petty. But then I remembered the hollow feeling in my chest the day I'd discovered them. The way Michael couldn't even look at me. The casual cruelty in Ava's assessment of my body. And I remembered the months of hard work, the early mornings, the physical pain, the emotional excavation I'd done to rebuild myself. I deserved this moment. I had earned it. I stepped out of the car and walked into the hotel with my head high. The gala was being held in the hotel's grand ballroom, a space designed to impress with its soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and marble floors. I collected my name badge from the registration table and entered the already crowded room, scanning faces for the one I'd come to see. A server passed with champagne, and I took a glass, sipping slowly. I hadn't had alcohol in months. It didn't fit with my nutrition plan, but tonight called for a small indulgence. The bubbles tickled my nose as I continued my casual surveillance of the room. And then I saw her. Ava was standing near one of the tall floral arrangements, laughing with an older man in a tuxedo. She wore a simple black dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek chignon. She looked exactly as I remembered, except for one detail. Without the smug satisfaction she'd worn in my bedroom, her face seemed somehow less impressive. Pretty, certainly, but not the devastating beauty I'd built up in my mind. I watched her for several minutes, gathering my courage, rehearsing what I might say. Then she excused herself from her conversation and headed toward the ladies' room. It was time. I followed her, my pulse hammering in my ears. The restroom was elegant, with a small sitting area separated from the stalls and sinks. Ava was touching up her lipstick when I entered. Our eyes met in the mirror, and I saw the moment of confusion cross her face. She knew she should recognize me but couldn't place me. I smiled. "Hello, Ava." She turned, lipstick still in hand, brow furrowed slightly. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" "We met once," I said, stepping closer. "In my bedroom, while you were sleeping with my husband." Her face drained of color. Her eyes widened as recognition dawned, traveling from my face down to my body and back up again. "Claire?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The very same," I replied, my tone pleasant, conversational. "Though not quite the same, as you can see." Ava took an involuntary step backward, bumping into the counter behind her. "What are you doing here?" "Supporting arts education," I said with a small shrug. "It's a cause close to my heart. I am a teacher, after all." "You ... You look different," she managed. "Do I?" I raised an eyebrow, enjoying her discomfort far more than I should have. "How so?" She gestured vaguely, clearly uncomfortable. "You've lost weight." "Yes," I agreed. "Quite a lot, actually. 50 pounds, give or take." "That's impressive," she said, clearly searching for solid conversational ground. "Thank you." I took another step toward her, closing the distance between us. "Would you like to know why I did it?" She swallowed visibly. "I should really get back to the event. I'm on the committee and I did it because of you, Ava." That stopped her. She stared at me, confusion and wariness battling on her face. "What do you mean?" "The day I found you with Michael, do you remember what you said about me?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. She looked away, a flush rising on her cheeks. That was a difficult situation. I said things I shouldn't have. "You called me fat," I said, the words crystal clear in the quiet bathroom. "You looked at me, a woman whose husband you were sleeping with in her own bed, and your criticism wasn't about my relationship or my character. It was about my body." Ava's eyes darted to the door, but I was blocking her path now, not threateningly, but definitely intentionally. I'm sorry, she said, the words tumbling out quickly. That was cruel and shallow, and I've felt terrible about it. If it helps, Michael and I aren't together anymore. It ended right after that day. It doesn't help, I said honestly. But it's interesting information. Thank you for sharing. I took a small step back, giving her a little space, watching her shoulders relax slightly. When I started losing weight, I continued, it was because of what you said. I wanted to prove you wrong. I wanted to show up somewhere looking like this. I gestured to my transformed body, and see your face when you realized who I was. Ava winced. And now you have. Now I have, I agreed. But something happened along the way, Ava. Something unexpected. She looked at me warily. What? I stopped caring what you think. I smiled, a genuine smile that felt like freedom, or what Michael thinks. Or what anyone thinks, really. I started doing this for revenge, but somewhere along the line it became about me, about what I wanted, about creating a life that fits me now, not trying to fix the one that was broken. Ava stared at me, clearly unsure how to respond. So thank you, I said, surprising both of us. Your cruelty turned out to be the catalyst for the best thing that's ever happened to me. With those words, I felt a shift inside me, a final piece clicking into place. The hot coal of anger that had been burning for months suddenly cooled, not entirely extinguished, but transformed into something else, something that felt remarkably like peace. Ava's eyes had filled with tears, though whether from shame or relief at being let off the hook, I couldn't tell. I really am sorry, she said quietly. For everything. I nodded, accepting her apology without needing it. Enjoy the rest of your evening, Ava. I hear the silent auction has some amazing items this year. I turned and walked out of the bathroom, feeling lighter than I had in months. I had come for confrontation, for the satisfaction of making her uncomfortable, maybe even for making her feel as small as she had once made me feel. But standing there, looking at her, I had realized an essential truth. She was just a person. Flawed, insecure in her own ways, not the villain I had built her up to be. My phone buzzed with a text from Natalie. How's Operation Revenge dress going? Do I need to post bail? I smiled and typed back, mission accomplished, but not how I expected. Tell you everything tomorrow. I stayed at the gala for another hour, actually enjoying the food, a small portion, the music, and surprisingly, the company. I bid on a weekend getaway package in the silent auction and even won it, a 2-night stay at a luxury spa retreat in Michigan. Something the old Claire would have considered an unnecessary extravagance, but that the new Claire recognized as an investment in herself. As I waited for my Uber outside the hotel, I saw Ava exit with a group of committee members. Our eyes met briefly across the driveway. She gave me a small, uncertain nod, which I returned before turning away. The Uber arrived, and as we pulled away from the curb, I found myself smiling. Not because of what had happened with Ava, but because of what had happened with me. The revenge I had planned for months had turned out to be unnecessary. Somewhere along the way, without realizing it, I had already won. Not by making Ava feel bad, but by refusing to let her casual cruelty define me. By taking control of my narrative, by building a new life that had nothing to do with Michael's betrayal or Ava's insult. I had lost 50 pounds, yes, but I had gained something far more valuable myself. As the city lights blurred past the car window, I felt the future opening up before me, undefined, unwritten, full of possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to imagine before tonight. And for the first time since that Tuesday in October, I was genuinely excited to discover what came next. The morning after the gala, I woke up with a strange, unfamiliar feeling in my chest. It took me a moment to identify it. Lightness. The heaviness that had been my constant companion for months, through the divorce proceedings, through the grueling workouts, through the nights spent staring at the ceiling replaying Michael's betrayal, had lifted. Not completely, but noticeably. I lay in bed, watching dust motes dance in the spring sunlight streaming through my bedroom window, and tried to understand what had changed. The confrontation with Ava should have been the climax of my revenge story, the moment where I finally got to deliver the cutting remarks I'd been rehearsing for months. Instead, it had somehow become a moment of release, of letting go. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Natalie, of course. I'm outside with coffee and need details. Let me in or I'm drinking both lattes. I smiled and texted back, doors unlocked. I'm still in bed. Minutes later, Natalie burst into my bedroom, 2 paper cups in hand and curiosity blazing in her eyes. She kicked off her shoes and climbed onto the bed beside me, handing me a cup. Spill. Everything. Now. I told her about the gala, about following Ava to the bathroom, about the confrontation that wasn't really a confrontation at all. Wait, Natalie interrupted, her brow furrowed. You thanked her? The woman who slept with your husband and called you fat? You thanked her? I laughed at Natalie's indignation. I know how it sounds. But standing there looking at her, I realized something. She isn't the villain in my story. Neither is Michael, really. That cheating bastard isn't a villain? Natalie's eyebrows nearly disappeared into her hairline. Oh, he's definitely a cheating bastard. I clarified. What he did was wrong, betrayal with a capital B. But making him the villain means I'm the victim. And I don't want to be the victim in my own life anymore, Nat. I want to be the protagonist. Natalie took a thoughtful sip of her coffee. So basically you went there for revenge but ended up having a personal epiphany instead. Something like that. She searched for the right word. Disappointingly mature of you. We both burst out laughing, and for a moment I felt normal again. Just two friends sharing coffee and gossip on a Saturday morning, as if the foundations of my life hadn't been completely dismantled and rebuilt over the past 6 months. But seriously, Natalie said when our laughter died down, are you okay? Really okay, not just saying you're okay so I won't worry, okay? I considered the question carefully. I think I am. Not completely healed, not by a long shot, but I feel like I've turned a corner. Like I can see a future now that isn't defined by what happened. Natalie studied my face, then nodded, apparently satisfied with what she saw. Good. Now, important question. What are you going to do with all this fabulous new energy and your smoking hot revenge body? I rolled my eyes at revenge body, but the question was valid. For months, my entire focus had been on transformation with a very specific end goal. Now that I'd reached that goal, though not in the way I'd anticipated, what came next? I don't know, I admitted. Keep teaching, obviously. Keep working out because it turns out I actually enjoy feeling strong. But beyond that, I shrugged. I haven't really thought about it. Well, I have, Natalie said, her eyes gleaming with mischief. And I think it's time for Claire Thompson to get back in the game. The game? Dating, you gorgeous idiot. Remember dating? That thing where you meet someone interesting and they buy you dinner and maybe eventually you let them see you naked? I groaned and pulled a pillow over my face. Absolutely not. I am nowhere near ready for that. Natalie yanked the pillow away. I'm not suggesting you start trolling for husband number 2 tomorrow. But it's been 6 months, Claire. The divorce is final. You're in the best shape of your life. And from what you've told me, you've achieved emotional closure, or something annoyingly zen like that. 6 months is nothing, I protested. People take years to recover from divorce. Sure, some people do. Other people decide they're not going to let a cheating ex determine how long they sit on the sidelines of their own life. I narrowed my eyes at her. That's manipulative. Is it working? I sighed. Maybe. A little. But even if I wanted to date, which I'm not saying I do, I wouldn't know where to start. I met Michael in college. I've never used a dating app. I work with teenagers and middle-aged women all day. When exactly am I supposed to meet eligible men? Natalie's smile turned positively devious. Funny you should ask, because Jason is having a housewarming party next weekend, and he specifically asked me to invite you. Jason was Natalie's younger brother, a software engineer who had recently bought his first condo. He and I had always gotten along well, but I'd seen him exactly once since the separation. A brief, awkward encounter at Natalie's birthday dinner where he'd been painfully polite, and I'd been still too raw to manage more than basic social niceties. Why would Jason specifically invite me? I asked suspiciously. Because he's my brother, and he knows I'll murder him if he doesn't include my best friend in his social events, Natalie said with faux innocence. And possibly because his new place is in the same building as a certain Derek who you may know from the gym. My stomach did a little flip. Derek? My trainer Derek? The very same. Apparently, they met in the elevator, got talking about homebrewing or fantasy football or some other male bonding activity, and now they're friends. And Jason, being the wonderful, thoughtful brother that he is, thought you might enjoy seeing a familiar face at the party. I stared at her, processing this information. Derek was attractive, certainly. More importantly, he was kind and encouraging, and had never once made me feel self-conscious about my body, even in those early days when I'd been so painfully aware of my size in the gym. But he was also at least 8 years younger than me, and my trainer, which created a professional boundary I wasn't sure we should cross. I don't know, Nat, I said hesitantly. It might be weird. He's my trainer. So get a different trainer, she said with a dismissive wave. Or keep him as your trainer and just go to the party to be social. No pressure, no expectations, just a normal adult going to a normal social gathering. Put that way, it did sound ridiculous to refuse. What was I afraid of? That Derek might think I was interested in him? That I might actually be interested in him? Both possibilities were mildly terrifying, but also not entirely unpleasant to contemplate. Fine, I conceded. I'll go to the party. But I'm making no promises about flirting with anyone, especially Derek. Natalie clapped her hands together in triumph. Excellent! And don't worry about flirting. With the way you look now, you won't have to try. The flirting will come to you. I rolled my eyes again, but secretly, a small part of me hoped she was right. The week before Jason's party, I found myself paying more attention to Derek during our training sessions. Had his eyes always crinkled that way when he laughed? Had his forearms always been so forearmy? It was disconcerting to suddenly see him through this new lens of potential attraction. For his part, Derek remained entirely professional, focused on adjusting my form and pushing me to increase my weights as appropriate. If he knew I would be at Jason's party, he gave no indication. This was simultaneously relieving and slightly disappointing. Friday night arrived and I stood in front of my closet, confronting an unexpected problem. I had nothing to wear. Most of my pre-weight loss clothes were too big now, hanging off me in unflattering ways. My workout clothes weren't appropriate for a party, and the formal gown from the charity gala was definitely overkill for a casual housewarming. I called Natalie in a panic. Emergency clothing crisis. Need help. Coming over now? I said without preamble. I've been waiting for this call, she replied, sounding smug. I'll open the wine. 30 minutes later, we were in her bedroom, my limited wardrobe options spread across her bed. These are all horrible, Natalie declared, sorting through the items I'd brought. Why do you own so many cardigans? Are you secretly 67 years old? I'm an English teacher, I defended. Cardigans are practically our uniform. And they're comfortable. They're shapeless potato sacks, she countered. And you no longer have a potato-shaped body, so we're not hiding it under knitted armor. She disappeared into her own walk-in closet, emerging with an armful of options. Try these. We're about the same size now. I eyed the pile warily. Natalie's style had always been more daring than mine. More color, more skin, more statement pieces. But I had to admit, continuing to dress in my old, safe choices didn't align with the new direction of my life. After trying on several outfits that were immediate no's, a backless halter top that made me feel like I was trying too hard, a jumpsuit that was somehow both too tight and too loose in all the wrong places, we settled on a simple but elegant combination: dark jeans that hugged my new curves, a silky emerald top that complemented my complexion, and strappy sandals with just enough heel to elongate my legs without making me uncomfortable. I studied my reflection in Natalie's full-length mirror, hardly recognizing myself. The woman looking back at me was confident, stylish, put together in a way I hadn't been even before the weight gain of the past few years. You look amazing, Natalie said, coming up behind me. Like yourself, but the version of yourself that you always deserved to be. Tears pricked unexpectedly at my eyes. Thank you, I said softly. Not just for the clothes, but for everything. For being there through all of this. I couldn't have done it without you. Natalie squeezed my shoulders. That's what best friends are for. Now can we please talk about what you're going to say to hot trainer Derek when you see him outside the gym for the first time? I groaned. Can we just have a normal conversation like normal humans? Hi Derek, funny seeing you here. Yes, the weather has been lovely lately. Oh, you like craft beer? How interesting. Boring, Natalie declared. You should definitely mention how his training has transformed your body. Maybe offer to show him specific results in private. I am not saying that. Fine, be boring. She sighed dramatically. But at least promise me you'll be open to possibilities. That's all I ask. I thought about the past 6 months, about how closing one door had inadvertently opened so many others, about how the path I'd chosen out of pain and anger had led me somewhere I never expected to be. I promise, I said. I'm open to possibilities. Jason's new condo was in a trendy downtown high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows offering spectacular views of the Chicago skyline. The party was already in full swing when Natalie and I arrived, music pulsing and conversations flowing as freely as the drinks. Jason greeted us at the door with hugs. "Claire, you look amazing," he said, stepping back to take in my appearance. "I mean, you always looked great, but wow. Whatever you're doing, it's working for you." I felt a blush rise to my cheeks. Thanks, Jason. The place looks fantastic. Come in, let me give you the tour. Drinks are in the kitchen, food is everywhere. Make yourselves at home. As Jason led us through the condo, pointing out features and introducing us to people, I scanned the crowded rooms for Derek. Not because I was specifically looking for him, I told myself, just because it would be nice to see a familiar face. We reached the balcony, where a group was gathered around an impressive grill, and there he was, a beer in hand, laughing at something someone had said. He looked different outside the gym, more relaxed in jeans and a simple button-down shirt, his dark hair slightly tousled by the spring breeze. Jason followed my gaze and grinned. "Oh good, you've spotted Derek. He mentioned you might be coming. Said something about finally seeing if his star client could have fun outside the torture chamber." I laughed, both pleased and embarrassed that Derek had talked about me. "The gym is definitely a torture chamber some days. I'll leave you two to discuss your mutual love of physical punishment," Jason said with a wink, slipping back inside to greet new arrivals. Natalie nudged me forward. "Go. Be charming. I'll be inside finding my own entertainment." Before I could protest, she was gone, and Derek had noticed me. His face lit up with a smile that made my heart do a little stutter step. "Claire! You made it," he said, crossing the balcony to greet me. I wasn't sure if Jason was serious when he said he knew you. "Small world?" I replied, suddenly very aware of how different this context was from our usual interactions. At the gym, I was often red-faced, sweaty, counting reps through gritted teeth. Here, I was just a woman at a party, and he was just a man. A very attractive man whose arms I had admired with professional detachment for months. "You look great," he said, his eyes taking in my outfit. "That color really suits you." "Thanks. It's nice to wear something other than workout clothes for a change." "I know what you mean. I practically live in athletic wear." He gestured to his button-down. "This is actually the first time I've worn real clothes all week." "Well, you clean up nice?" I said, then immediately wished I could take back the flirtatious tone that had crept into my voice. But Derek just smiled, apparently not put off by it. "Can I get you a drink? Jason has an impressive selection." "Sure, wine if he has it. Red preferably." "Coming right up. Don't go anywhere." As Derek disappeared inside, I took a moment to collect myself. This was exactly what I'd been afraid of, the immediate awkwardness of shifting from a professional relationship to a social one. But beneath the awkwardness was something else, something that felt suspiciously like excitement, like possibility. Derek returned with 2 glasses of wine. "Hope this works. Jason says it's a good Cabernet, but my wine knowledge stops at red and white." I laughed, taking the glass. "Mine too, honestly. I pretend to know the difference between varietals, but it's all performance." A woman who admits her wine ignorance. Refreshing. He clinked his glass gently against mine. To honesty, I echoed, taking a sip. The wine was good, rich and smooth. Or maybe it just tasted better because of the company. We moved to the edge of the balcony, looking out at the city lights. The conversation flowed easily, about the gym, about my teaching, about his journey to becoming a trainer after a college sports injury redirected his career plans. I learned he was 32, 5 years younger than me rather than the 8 I'd estimated. I learned he had a dog named Einstein, a ridiculously smart border collie who could open the refrigerator. I learned he had 3 sisters and remained close to his parents, who lived in Michigan. In turn, I told him about my divorce in broad strokes, without going into the humiliating details. About how fitness had become my lifeline during the darkest period. About my plans to hike part of the Appalachian Trail that summer, a new goal I'd set for myself now that my body was capable of it. "That's amazing," he said when I mentioned the hiking plan. "The AT is on my bucket list too." "Which section are you doing?" "I'm starting with just a week on the Vermont portion. Kind of a test run to see if I enjoy it as much in reality as I do in theory." "Smart approach. Jumping into a through hike is how people end up quitting after 3 days." He hesitated, then added, "I'd be happy to recommend some training adjustments to prepare you for hiking specifically. Different muscle groups than general fitness." "I'd appreciate that," I said, genuinely grateful for the offer. "Though I should probably find a new trainer going forward." I gestured between us, indicating our current social interaction. "Probably crosses some professional boundary." Derek's expression grew more serious. "It does, technically. But I have to admit, I've been hoping for an opportunity like this. To see you outside the gym, I mean." My pulse quickened. "You have?" He nodded, setting his wine glass on the balcony ledge. "Claire, I've watched you transform over the past few months. Not just physically, though that's been incredible to witness, but the way you've grown in confidence, in determination. The way you never give up even when the workout is brutal. He searched for the right word. Inspiring and attractive. Very attractive. I felt heat rise to my face that had nothing to do with the wine. Oh, and I completely understand if you're not interested or not ready, he continued quickly. The divorce is still fresh and I'm your trainer, and there are probably a dozen reasons why this is a bad idea. But I'd hate myself if I didn't at least tell you that I'd like to take you to dinner sometime. A real dinner, not a protein shake between sets. I laughed at that, the tension breaking slightly. That sounds nice, actually. Dinner without counting macros or timing my protein intake. Is that a yes? His smile was cautiously hopeful. I thought about Natalie's advice to be open to possibilities, about the lightness I'd felt since confronting Ava, the sense that a new chapter was beginning. Yes, I said, surprising myself with how right it felt. I'd like that. His smile widened, and for a moment I thought he might kiss me right there on the balcony. Instead, he reached for his wine glass again. Great. I'll call you tomorrow to set it up, and I'll find you a new trainer on Monday. That fast, huh? Professional ethics, he said with a mock-serious expression. Can't have anyone thinking I'm giving you special treatment at the gym. You mean no more letting me skip the last set of burpees? Oh, I never let you skip those. You just thought you were getting away with it. We both laughed, and in that moment, surrounded by the city lights and the spring night air, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time, the simple joy of connection, of potential, of a future unwritten but full of promise. The rest of the party passed in a pleasant blur. Derek and I eventually rejoined the larger group, but there was a new awareness between us, small glances and shared smiles that felt like a private conversation happening beneath the surface of the general socializing. When Natalie and I left around midnight, Derek walked us to the elevator. Tomorrow, he said to me as the doors opened. I'll call you. I'll answer, I replied with a smile. In the taxi home, Natalie was practically vibrating with curiosity. Well, what happened? I saw you two on the balcony looking very cozy. We talked, I said, trying and failing to suppress a smile. He's going to call me tomorrow about dinner. Natalie squealed so loudly the taxi driver jumped. I knew it. I told you the flirting would come to you. Details, please. Everything. I recounted our conversation, the easy flow of it, the moment when he'd expressed interest. As I described it, I realized how natural it had felt, how unlike the awkward, forced interactions I'd been expecting. So when's the wedding? Natalie teased when I finished. Oh my God, we haven't even had a first date yet. Slow down. Fine. But I expect full reports after said first date, including whether trainer Derek is as fit without his clothes as he is with them. Natalie! I swatted her arm, but I was laughing. I'm not sleeping with him on the first date. I'm not sleeping with anyone anytime soon. I need to take this slow. Of course, she agreed with exaggerated solemnity. Very slow. Glacial even. Maybe by the third date. I rolled my eyes but didn't argue. The truth was, I had no idea what pace would feel right. The last time I'd dated, I'd been in my early 20s, with all the insecurity and eagerness that entailed. Now, at 37, with a failed marriage behind me and a newfound sense of self, the rules would be different. I would be different. Derek called the next day, as promised. We arranged dinner for the following Friday, enough time for him to formally terminate our training relationship and assign me to a new trainer, maintaining what he called plausible deniability. At the gym, the week passed in a strange mixture of anticipation and nervousness. I found myself wondering what it would be like to interact with Derek in yet another new context. Not as trainer and client, not as casual acquaintances at a party, but as two people on an actual date. Would the easy conversation continue? Would there be awkward silences? Would he kiss me goodnight? The last question occupied an embarrassing amount of my mental energy. By Friday, I had changed outfits 6 times and was seriously considering canceling due to a fabricated illness when Natalie video called to check on me. Stop panicking, she said as soon as she saw my face. It's dinner, not a space launch. I know that, I said, sitting on the edge of my bed surrounded by discarded clothing options. But I haven't been on a first date in 15 years, Nat. What if I've forgotten how to do this? It's like riding a bike. Except instead of a bike, it's a hot personal trainer, and instead of riding, please don't finish that sentence, I interrupted, laughing despite my anxiety. I'm nervous enough without your colorful metaphors. Wear the green wrap dress, she said, changing tactics. It shows off your waist, it's appropriate for a nice restaurant, and most importantly, it's easy to take off if the night goes well. Natalie! What? I'm just being practical. Now fix your hair. Yes, like that with the soft waves, and remember that he already likes you. He's seen you at your sweatiest, gruntiest, most disheveled gym self, and he still asked you out. That's a good sign. She had a point. Derek had witnessed me in conditions no one would consider attractive. Red-faced, hair plastered to my forehead, groaning through the last set of weighted squats. If he found me appealing then, a nice dress and proper makeup could only be an improvement. You're right, I conceded. This doesn't have to be complicated. Exactly. Just be yourself. The new, confident, take-no-prisoners version of yourself who knows what she wants and isn't afraid to go after it. I wished I felt as confident as Natalie believed me to be, but as I finished getting ready, I tried to channel some of that energy. Whatever happened tonight, it was just one dinner. One step on a journey that was already in progress. Derek picked me up at 7, looking devastatingly handsome in dark jeans and a sports coat over a simple button-down shirt. His eyes widened appreciatively when I opened the door. "Wow," he said simply. "You look beautiful, Claire." "Thank you," I replied, feeling a flush of pleasure at his reaction. "You don't look so bad yourself." He took me to a small Italian restaurant in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place with candlelit tables and a wine list longer than the menu. It was intimate without being overtly romantic, a perfect choice for a first date where we were still finding our footing. "I hope this works," he said as we were seated. I wanted somewhere nice but not pretentious. "It's perfect," I assured him, looking around at the warm, inviting space. "I love Italian food." "I know," he said with a small smile. "You mentioned once that pasta was your cheat day go-to." I was touched that he'd remembered such a casual comment. Very observant. "Part of the job," he replied. "Good trainers pay attention to the details." "And is this part of the job too?" I asked, gesturing between us. "Taking clients to dinner?" His expression grew more serious. "Definitely not. This is breaking all kinds of professional protocols. Which is why, as of yesterday, you are officially not my client anymore. Jennifer will be your new trainer. She specializes in functional fitness, which will be perfect for your hiking plans." "You really did think of everything." "I try to." He held my gaze across the table. "Especially when it's important to me." The intensity of his look made my breath catch. I reached for my water glass to give myself a moment to recover. "So, now that I'm not your client, what should we talk about? We've already covered the gym, my job, your dog. How about dreams?" he suggested. Not the sleeping kind, but the what do you want for your life kind. "Starting with the light topics, I see," I teased. He shrugged, unapologetic. "I find it more interesting than discussing the weather. But we can start simpler if you prefer." "Favorite movie?" "Pride and Prejudice," I answered without hesitation. The 2005 version with Keira Knightley, though I know that's controversial among Austen purists. "I've never seen it," he admitted, "but I'm willing to be educated." "And yours?" "The original Star Wars trilogy. Classic hero's journey narrative structure." I raised an eyebrow. "The personal trainer is analyzing narrative structure?" "I did have a life before fitness," he laughed, "including an English literature minor in college." "No way." "Way." I was 2 semesters away from a double major when I realized I couldn't sit still at a desk for the rest of my life. So I focused on sports medicine instead. This revelation delighted me. "So you could actually discuss the symbolism in The Great Gatsby if pressed?" "The green light represents Gatsby's unattainable dreams and the corruption of the American dream itself," he recited with a grin. "But I'd rather discuss why you decided to teach high school English instead of, say, becoming a novelist yourself." And just like that, we were deep in conversation again, as easily as we had been on Jason's balcony. We talked through appetizers and pasta, through a shared dessert and coffee. About books and movies, yes, but also about deeper things. My fear of never finding purpose after my marriage ended, his regret at letting a college injury derail his original career plans, my complicated relationship with my father, his close bond with his sisters. It was the most engaged, present first date I'd ever experienced. No checking of watches, no awkward lulls, no searching for the next topic. Just a genuine connection that seemed to deepen with each exchange. When the check came, I reached for my purse, but Derek gently touched my hand to stop me. "Please let me get this one," he said. "You can treat next time if you want." Next time. The simple assumption that there would be a next time made me smile. Deal. Outside the restaurant, the spring night had turned cooler. Derek noticed me shiver slightly and slipped his jacket around my shoulders, a gesture so considerate and old-fashioned it made my heart flutter. I'd like to walk a bit if you're up for it, he said. There's a nice park just a block over. I'd like that. We strolled in comfortable silence for a few minutes, our hands occasionally brushing against each other until, with a quiet deliberateness that gave me time to pull away if I wanted, Derek took my hand in his. His palm was warm against mine, the contact simple but thrilling. In the park, we found a bench overlooking a small pond, silver in the moonlight. Sitting close together, still holding hands, I felt a sense of peace mixed with anticipation. Thank you for tonight, Derek said, turning slightly to face me. For taking a chance on this. On me. Thank you for asking, I replied. It's been a long time since I searched for the right word. Seen. You really see me? How could I not? His free hand came up to gently touch my cheek. Claire, may I kiss you? The directness of the question, the respect inherent in asking rather than assuming, made my answer easy. Yes. He leaned in slowly, giving me time to change my mind. But I didn't want to change my mind. I wanted this kiss, wanted the connection it represented, wanted the new beginning it promised. His lips met mine softly at first, a tentative exploration that quickly deepened as I responded. His hand slid from my cheek to the back of my neck, cradling my head as the kiss intensified. I felt myself melting into him, all the nervousness of the evening transforming into a different kind of tension, the delicious tension of attraction fulfilled. When we finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Derek rested his forehead against mine. Wow. Yeah, I agreed, smiling. Wow. I've been wanting to do that since the first time you deadlifted your body weight and didn't even realize what an achievement it was. I laughed softly. That's an oddly specific moment of attraction. It was the look on your face, pure determination, no fear. I found it incredibly sexy. And here I was thinking I looked like a tomato about to explode. His thumb traced my lower lip, sending shivers down my spine. Beautiful. You looked beautiful. You always do. He kissed me again, and this time there was less hesitation, more certainty. My hands found their way to his shoulders, feeling the strength there, the solidity that had nothing to do with physical fitness and everything to do with character. When we walked back to his car hand in hand, I felt lighter than I had in months. Not because Derek had somehow magically erased the pain of the past year, but because he represented something I had stopped believing in, the possibility of joy after heartbreak, the chance to build something new from the ashes of what had been destroyed. He drove me home, walked me to my door like a gentleman. When I invited him in for coffee, he smiled but shook his head. Rain check? I have an early client tomorrow. I was equal parts disappointed and relieved. The evening had been perfect, and part of me wanted to see where the obvious attraction between us might lead. But another part, the wiser part, knew that rushing into physical intimacy might complicate what was still very new, very fragile. Rain check. I agreed. But I'm holding you to it. I hope you do. He kissed me once more, a lingering goodnight that promised more to come. I'll call you tomorrow. As I watched him walk back to his car, I realized I was still wearing his jacket. Derek, your coat! He turned with a grin. Keep it. Gives me an excuse to see you again. As if he needed an excuse. Inside my apartment, I leaned against the closed door, hugging his jacket around me like a teenage girl after prom. Hemingway padded over to greet me, his tail wagging curiously at the unfamiliar scent on the garment. I had a date, Hem, I told him, scratching behind his ears. A really good date? My phone chimed with a text from Natalie. Well? I typed back. It was perfect. He kissed me. Twice. Details tomorrow. Her response was immediate. Told you so! I laughed and headed to my bedroom, slipping off the green dress and hanging it carefully in my closet. As I changed into pajamas, I caught sight of myself in the mirror and paused. The woman looking back at me wasn't just physically transformed from the person I'd been 6 months ago. There was something different in her eyes, in the set of her shoulders. A confidence that came not from weight loss or new clothes or even a successful date, but from something deeper. I had survived being broken. More than survived, I had rebuilt myself, stronger in the broken places. And in doing so, I had discovered a resilience I never knew I possessed. Whatever happened with Derek, whether it developed into something lasting or remained a brief, sweet interlude, I knew now that I would be okay. More than okay, I would thrive. The realization was perhaps the most significant transformation of all. The following weeks unfolded with a sense of newness that made even the most ordinary days feel fresh and full of possibility. Derek and I settled into a rhythm of seeing each other 2 or 3 times a week. Dinner dates, movies, long walks with Hemingway and sometimes Einstein, who got along famously after an initial period of canine diplomacy. We took things slowly in the physical sense, both of us wary of rushing what felt like it could be significant. Our goodnight kisses grew progressively longer, more intense, but by unspoken agreement, we didn't take things further until our 5th date, when a goodnight kiss at my door turned into coffee, which turned into more kissing on my couch, which led eventually to my bedroom. Being intimate with someone new after 12 years of marriage was both terrifying and exhilarating. I had moments of self-consciousness about my body. Despite the dramatic changes, I still had stretch marks, still had areas that would never be perfectly firm. But Derek touched me with such genuine appreciation, such obvious desire, that those insecurities gradually faded. "You're beautiful?" he whispered against my skin. "Every inch of you." And in his eyes I believed it was true. My new trainer, Jennifer, proved to be exactly what Derek had promised, knowledgeable about functional fitness and full of practical advice for my upcoming hiking trip. She pushed me in different ways than Derek had, focusing on endurance and stability rather than pure strength. Under her guidance, I added weekend practice hikes with a loaded backpack, gradually increasing the distance and difficulty. School ended for the summer in early June, giving me more time to prepare for my Appalachian Trail adventure, scheduled for the first week of July. Derek helped me shop for equipment, offering insights from his own backpacking experiences. We tested my new tent in his backyard, laughing as we struggled with the poles and ending up in a tangled heap of nylon and limbs. "Maybe I should rethink the solo hiking plan," I joked as we finally got the tent standing. Derek's expression grew more serious. "Are you nervous about going alone?" I considered the question honestly. A little. I've never done anything like this by myself before. Even before Michael, I always traveled with friends, with family. Being completely on my own in the wilderness is intimidating. He nodded, understanding. "It's a big step. But from what I've seen, you're more than capable." He hesitated, then added, "I'd offer to come with you, but I think I understand why this is something you need to do solo." His perceptiveness touched me. "Maybe next time we could go together," I suggested. "After I've proven to myself that I can do it alone." "I'd like that." He smiled, pulling me close. "Very much." As July approached, I found myself thinking more often about Michael and Ava, about the chain of events that had led me here. It had been nearly 9 months since Discovery Day, 6 months since the divorce was finalized. The acute pain had faded to a dull ache that surfaced only occasionally, usually when something specifically triggered a memory. I hadn't seen or spoken to Michael since signing the final divorce papers. Our communication had been handled entirely through lawyers, a clean break that was both merciful and strangely unsatisfying. There had been no final confrontation, no opportunity to ask the questions that sometimes still kept me awake at night. Why her? When did you stop loving me? Was it something I could have prevented? Rationally, I knew the answers didn't matter. Whatever his reasons, whatever his timeline, the end result was the same. We were no longer husband and wife. We were no longer anything to each other. But emotions aren't rational, and as my trip approached, this journey I was taking as a symbol of my independence, my rebirth, I found myself wanting closure in a way I hadn't before. "I think I need to see Michael," I told Natalie over lunch, a week before my departure date. "Before I leave for Vermont." She put down her fork, studying my face. "Are you sure that's a good idea? You've been doing so well." "I am doing well," I agreed. "That's why I think I can handle it now. There are things I need to say to him, questions I need answered. I can't fully move forward until I do." Natalie sighed. "I understand. Just be prepared for the possibility that his answers won't give you the closure you're hoping for. Sometimes there aren't satisfying explanations for why people hurt us." "I know that," I said, pushing my salad around the plate. "But I still need to try." That night, I composed a brief, neutral email to Michael's work address. "I'd like to meet to talk before I leave town next week. Coffee at Meridian on Thursday at 4? His reply came the next morning. "I'll be there." I debated whether to tell Derek about the planned meeting. We hadn't precisely defined our relationship yet, but we were definitely exclusive, definitely serious. Still, discussing my ex-husband felt awkward, like bringing a shadow into what had so far been nothing but light between us. In the end, honesty won out. "I'm meeting Michael for coffee on Thursday," I told him as we walked our dogs in the park that evening. I need some closure before my trip. Derek was quiet for a moment, his hand steady in mine. I think that makes sense, he said finally. Do you want me to come with you? Wait nearby, I mean not sit at the table or anything. The offer was so thoughtful, so supportive that I felt a rush of affection for him. Thank you, but no. This is something I need to do alone. One more solo journey before the big one. He nodded, understanding. Call me after if you want to talk about it. I will, I promised, squeezing his hand gratefully. Thursday arrived with a summer thunderstorm, the sky dark and grumbling as I made my way to Meridian Coffee. I'd chosen the location deliberately. It wasn't a place Michael and I had frequented together, held no memories that might cloud the conversation. I arrived 15 minutes early, claimed a small table near the back, and ordered a latte that I didn't really want but needed something to do with my hands. As the minutes ticked by, I rehearsed what I wanted to say, the questions I needed answered. I'd made a mental list, organized my thoughts, determined to stay calm and rational. All of that preparation dissolved the moment Michael walked through the door. He looked different, thinner, with new glasses and shorter hair. But the way he moved, the particular set of his shoulders as he shook rain from his jacket, was achingly familiar. For a brief, disorienting moment, I was transported back to our life together, to rainy evenings spent cooking dinner side by side, to the comfortable rhythm we'd established over 12 years. Then he saw me, and his eyes widened in surprise, and I was firmly back in the present. Back in my new reality, where this man was a stranger who had once known every inch of me, every secret, every dream. Claire, he said, approaching my table. You look different. Really different. I gestured to the chair across from me. 50 pounds different, to be exact. He sat down, still staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. It's more than the weight. You seem, I don't know, changed. I am changed, I said simply. In every possible way. A barista appeared, and Michael ordered black coffee, the same as he'd always taken it. Some things hadn't changed, apparently. When we were alone again, an awkward silence fell between us. All my carefully planned questions evaporated, leaving only the raw emotion I'd thought I'd moved past. Why did you want to meet? Michael finally asked, his voice carefully neutral. I took a deep breath. Closure, I guess. A chance to ask things I couldn't ask before. He nodded slowly. That's fair. What do you want to know? Now that the moment had arrived, I found it hard to articulate the questions that had been haunting me. Where to start? What to ask first? In the end, the most basic question emerged. Were you ever going to tell me? If I hadn't walked in that day, would you have confessed? Michael looked down at his coffee. I don't know, he said after a long pause. I'd like to think I would have, that my conscience would have eventually forced the issue. But honestly, I'm not sure. His honesty, at least, was refreshing. How long was it going on? 4 months, he admitted. It started at a company retreat in May. 4 months. While I was grading papers, walking Hemingway, bringing him coffee in bed, he had been living a double life for 4 months. Did you love her? The question hurt to ask, but I needed to know. Michael sighed. I thought I might, or I convinced myself I might to justify what I was doing. But no, I don't think it was love. It was excitement, novelty, a distraction from feeling like my life had become predictable, predetermined. And us? Our marriage? Was that love or just habit by the end? He looked at me directly for the first time. I did love you, Claire. For most of our marriage, I loved you deeply. But somewhere along the way, I stopped appreciating what we had. I started focusing on what was missing instead of what was there. I nodded, absorbing this. It wasn't entirely surprising. We'd both grown complacent in the marriage, taken each other for granted. The difference was that when dissatisfaction set in, I had tried to reconnect, while he had sought connection elsewhere. Are you still seeing her? Ava? Michael's eyebrows shot up. You know her name? I was there, Michael. I heard her voice, saw her face. Of course I know her name. He had the grace to look ashamed. No, we're not together. It ended that day, actually. After you left, we had a massive fight. She was upset that I hadn't defended her when she said what she said about you. I was upset that she'd been so cruel. We both realized it was a mistake. I thought about Ava's tearful face in the bathroom at the gala, her apology that had seemed genuine. She said the same thing when I saw her at the charity event. Michael's coffee cup clattered against its saucer. You saw Ava? When? A few months ago. At the spring soiree? You went there specifically to confront her? He looked shocked, as if he couldn't reconcile this information with the woman he had known. Yes. I said simply. At the time, it seemed important. Part of my recovery process. And now? I smiled slightly. Now it seems like a step I needed to take, but not the destination itself. Michael studied me, his expression thoughtful. You really have changed, not just physically. There's a confidence about you that wasn't there before. Losing your husband and 50 pounds will do that to a person, I said dryly. He winced. I deserved that. You did, I agreed. But that's not why I'm here. I didn't come to make you feel guilty, Michael. I came to understand. And do you understand? I considered the question carefully. I understand that what happened wasn't really about me or even about Ava. It was about you. Your choices, your dissatisfaction, your inability to either address the problems in our marriage or end it honorably before starting something new. He didn't argue, just nodded slowly. That's painfully accurate, but I also understand that I wasn't perfect either. I continued. I let myself stop growing, stop challenging myself. I settled into routines that felt safe but weren't fulfilling. I stopped seeing myself clearly, and eventually you did too. That doesn't excuse what I did, Michael said quietly. No, it doesn't. Nothing excuses betrayal. But understanding the context helps me make sense of it. Helps me see how we both contributed to the environment where it could happen. We sat in silence for a moment, the rain pattering against the windows creating a gentle backdrop to our difficult conversation. I am sorry, Claire, Michael finally said, his voice thick with emotion. Not just for the affair, but for how it ended. For not having the courage to address our problems directly. For letting you find out the way you did. For not defending you when Ava said those things. He took a shaky breath. You deserved better. From both of us. I felt tears prick at my eyes, the first I'd shed over Michael in months. Not tears of anger or pain this time, but a softer sorrow for what had been lost, what might have been. Thank you for saying that, I said when I could trust my voice. It helps to hear it. What about you? He asked after another silence. Are you happy now? I thought about my transformed body, my renewed passion for teaching, my plans for the Appalachian Trail. About Derek, whose kindness and honesty were healing wounds I hadn't realized were still open. I'm getting there, I said truthfully. I'm building a life I never would have imagined a year ago. And yes, much of it makes me very happy. I'm glad, he said, and he seemed to mean it. You deserve happiness, Claire. We talked for a while longer, about practical matters like the house, sold, the proceeds divided, about mutual friends we'd both lost contact with, about his new condo and my hiking plans. It was strange how we could slip into the easy conversational patterns of our marriage while sitting across from each other as practical strangers. When it was time to go, we stood somewhat awkwardly outside the coffee shop, the rain having given way to a humid, heavy sky. Thank you for meeting me, I said, offering my hand in a businesslike gesture. Michael looked at my outstretched hand, then stepped forward and hugged me instead. A brief, careful embrace that somehow managed to acknowledge both our history and the clear boundaries of our present. Take care of yourself on that trail, he said as he stepped back. Be safe. I will, I promised. Take care, Michael. We went our separate ways then, Michael heading west toward his new condo, me east toward the apartment that had become home. I walked slowly, processing the conversation, the unexpected emotions it had stirred. By the time I reached my building, I felt lighter, as if I'd set down a burden I hadn't realized I was still carrying. The meeting hadn't provided all the answers I'd hoped for. Some questions about love and betrayal simply don't have satisfying explanations, but it had given me something perhaps more valuable. Perspective. Michael and I had both made mistakes. We had both contributed to the slow erosion of our marriage. The affair had been his choice alone, and the cruelty of its discovery had been devastating. But the foundation had been crumbling long before that final blow. Understanding this didn't excuse his actions, but it helped me place them in context, helped me see our story not as a simple tale of villain and victim, but as the complex, messy human narrative it really was. I called Derek from my apartment, as promised. How did it go? He asked, his voice warm with concern. Better than I expected, I told him. Harder in some ways, easier in others. But I'm glad I did it. Do you want company tonight? I could bring dinner. I smiled at the offer, grateful for his sensitivity. Actually, I think I need a quiet evening to process. Rain check? Of course, he said without hesitation. Whatever you need. I'm here when you want me. And that, I realized as we said goodbye, was the difference. Derek offered support without expectation, space without abandonment. He was present in a way Michael hadn't been for a long time before the affair. I spent that evening alone but not lonely, sorting through the last of my preparations for the trail. Checking gear, reviewing maps, finalizing my itinerary. With each item crossed off my list, I felt more ready, not just for the hike, but for whatever came after. For the next chapter of my life, authored entirely by me. The morning of my departure dawned clear and bright, the July sun promising heat later but pleasant for now. Derek drove me to the bus station, my backpack secured in his trunk. "You've got everything? Water filter, first aid kit, bear spray?" I laughed at his concern. "Yes, Mother Hen. Everything on the list, checked twice. And you'll text when you have service? There are spots along the trail where you can get a signal." "I'll text," I promised. "But remember, part of the point is disconnecting. Don't worry if you don't hear from me for a day or two." He nodded, but his brow remained furrowed. "I know. It's just, I'm going to miss you." The simple admission made my heart swell. "I'll miss you too. But it's only a week. A week is a long time when you've become part of my daily routine." He pulled me close, kissing me with a tenderness that made me briefly reconsider my solo adventure plans. "Come back to me safely, okay?" "I will," I promised, resting my forehead against his. "And I'll have amazing stories to tell. I'm counting on it." The bus ride to Vermont was long but oddly peaceful, giving me time to read, to nap, to watch the landscape change from urban sprawl to rolling countryside. By the time we reached the small town nearest my trailhead, I was both exhausted and exhilarated, ready to begin the journey that represented so much more than just a physical challenge. I spent the night in a quaint bed and breakfast, enjoying what would be my last comfortable bed and hot shower for a week. In the morning, a local outfitter drove me and 2 other hikers to our respective trailheads, offering last-minute advice about water sources and weather conditions. And then suddenly I was alone. Standing at the edge of the forest, my pack secure on my shoulders, the trail stretching before me like a question waiting to be answered. I took a deep breath, adjusted my straps one final time, and stepped forward. Into the woods, into solitude, into the next phase of my journey. The first day was harder than I had anticipated, despite all my training. The pack, perfectly manageable during practice hikes in flat Chicago parks, seemed to gain weight with every hill I climbed. The July heat, even filtered through the forest canopy, made sweat trickle down my back, between my breasts, along my hairline. But with the difficulty came a deep satisfaction. Each step was a victory, each mile completed a testament to how far I had come, not just on the trail, but in the past 9 months. With every labored breath, every muscle ache, I was reminded of the strength I had built, the determination I had cultivated. I made camp that first night in a small clearing near a stream, setting up my tent with much more efficiency than Derek and I had managed in his backyard. As darkness fell, I sat outside with my camp stove, heating a simple meal of dehydrated pasta that tasted better than any gourmet dinner simply because I had earned it with my labor. The night was alive with sounds, rustling leaves, chirping insects, the occasional distant call of an owl or fox, sounds that might have been frightening in another context, but that felt right here, part of the natural world I had temporarily joined. I thought about texting Derek from my campsite. I had surprisingly good cell reception, but decided against it. This time was for me alone, for reconnecting with myself in a way that had nothing to do with relationships or external validation. Instead, I wrote in the journal I had brought, recording not just the physical details of the day's hike, but the emotions that accompanied them. The triumph of reaching a particularly challenging overlook, the moment of doubt when I lost the trail briefly, before finding the blaze that marked the correct path, the simple pleasure of cooling my feet in the stream after setting up camp. I fell asleep that night to the gentle gurgle of water over rocks, more at peace than I had been in longer than I could remember. The days that followed settled into a rhythm: wake at dawn, eat a simple breakfast, break camp, hike until early afternoon, make a new camp, explore the surrounding area, watch the sunset, sleep deeply, begin again. Each day brought new challenges: a sudden rainstorm that soaked through my supposedly waterproof jacket, a section of trail so rocky that each step required careful placement, a night so cold I wore every layer I had brought. But each day also brought new joys: a family of deer crossing the trail just yards ahead of me, a vista so beautiful it brought tears to my eyes, a chance encounter with other hikers who shared hot chocolate and stories around a communal campfire. I did text Derek occasionally when I had service, just brief updates to let him know I was safe, alive, thriving. His responses were always prompt, supportive, never demanding more than I was ready to give. On the fourth day, I reached a shelter, one of the three-sided structures built along the trail for hikers to use in bad weather. It was empty when I arrived, the previous night's occupants having continued their journeys. I decided to stay, grateful for the solid roof after 3 nights in my tent. As I was preparing my dinner, another hiker arrived, a woman perhaps 10 years older than me, lean and weathered with short gray hair and keen blue eyes. She introduced herself as Margot, a section hiker like me, though she had been tackling the trail in stages for several years. "Mind if I share the shelter?" she asked, dropping her pack with a sigh of relief. "Not at all," I replied, glad for the company after days of solitude. "I've got water boiling if you want some for your dinner." We fell into easy conversation as we ate our simple meals. Margot had been a corporate lawyer for 30 years before retiring early to travel and hike. She'd been married twice, both ended amicably, thank God, and had 2 adult children who thought she was crazy for spending her retirement on hiking trails instead of cruise ships. "What about you?" she asked, passing me a packet of cookies she'd produced from some hidden pocket in her pack. "What brings you to the AT?" I hesitated, unsure how much of my story to share with this stranger. But something about the trail, about the distance from my regular life, made honesty seem not just possible but necessary. "I'm rebuilding," I said simply. "After a divorce. After losing myself for a while." Margot nodded, understanding in her eyes. "The trail is good for that. Helps you remember who you are beneath all the layers society puts on you." "Exactly," I agreed, surprised and pleased by her comprehension. "It's like, out here I'm just me. Not an ex-wife, not a teacher, not someone who lost 50 pounds to prove a point. Just a woman walking in the woods. The simplicity is healing," Margot said, gazing out at the darkening forest. "I came out here after my first divorce, angry at the world, at myself, at the whole institution of marriage. Hiked for 2 weeks straight, barely speaking to anyone. By the time I came back to civilization, I had perspective I couldn't have gained any other way. We talked long into the night, sharing stories, advice, trail information. It was the kind of intense, immediate connection that sometimes happens between travelers, strangers who become confidants through the shared experience of displacement, of choosing to be somewhere other than their normal lives. When we parted ways the next morning, Margot heading south while I continued north, she hugged me like an old friend. "Remember," she said as we shouldered our packs, "the trail gives you what you need, not always what you think you want. Stay open to its lessons." I carried her words with me for the rest of my journey, finding truth in them as the days passed. The trail did seem to have a wisdom of its own, presenting challenges just when I needed to prove my strength, moments of breathtaking beauty when my spirit needed lifting, encounters with wildlife or other hikers that felt significant beyond their face value. On my final night on the trail, camped on a ridge with a view of the valley below, I wrote in my journal, trying to capture what the experience had given me. Not just physical accomplishment, though that was significant, but a deeper understanding of my own resilience, my capacity for solitude, my ability to find joy in simplicity. I had come to the trail seeking confirmation of my transformation. I had found that, but also discovered that transformation wasn't a fixed destination, but an ongoing journey. The work I had done over the past 9 months, the weight loss, the strength training, the emotional processing, wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. As the sun set on my last night in the wilderness, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that no artist could fully capture, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. For the pain that had driven me to change, for the friends who had supported me through it, for the strength I had discovered in myself. Even, in a strange way, for Michael and Ava, whose actions had set everything in motion. The next morning, I hiked out to the nearest road crossing, where a shuttle was scheduled to pick me up. As I emerged from the tree line, stepping from forest path to gravel parking area, I felt the shift acutely, from trail time back to real-world time, from wilderness simplicity to civilization's complexity. The shuttle arrived, carrying 2 fresh-faced hikers just starting their journey. We exchanged nods of understanding, they eager and nervous, me tired but fulfilled. The driver helped me load my pack, commenting on how light I traveled compared to most section hikers. "I've learned to carry only what I need," I told him, thinking how true that statement was beyond just physical possessions. The trip back to Chicago was a gradual re-entry, bus to train to taxi, each step bringing me closer to my regular life. I texted Derek from the station, arriving around 7. "Can't wait to see you." His reply came immediately, "I'll be waiting," with real food and clean towels. True to his word, Derek was at my apartment when the taxi dropped me off, grocery bags on the counter and a bouquet of wildflowers in a mason jar on the table. Hemingway, who had been staying with him while I was gone, nearly knocked me over with his enthusiastic greeting. "Welcome back, Appalachian adventurer," Derek said, enfolding me in an embrace that felt like coming home. He pulled back slightly, studying my face. "You look different." I smiled, remembering Michael saying the same thing in the coffee shop. But where Michael had seemed confused by the changes in me, Derek looked appreciative, understanding. "Good different or bad different?" I asked, suddenly aware of my appearance. Unwashed hair, sun-browned skin, probably a distinct trail aroma despite my attempts to clean up at the last rest stop. "Good different," he assured me, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "Peaceful. Like you found what you were looking for out there." "I think I did," I said, leaning into his touch. "Though it wasn't what I expected. That's usually how it works," he said wisely. "Now shower first or food first?" "No judgment either way." I laughed, grateful for his understanding. "Shower. Definitely shower. I smell like a week on the trail because, well, I've been a week on the trail. Shower it is. I'll have dinner ready when you're done." He kissed me lightly, unbothered by my disheveled state. "Take your time. You've earned it." The hot water was glorious after days of cold streams and baby wipes. I stood under the spray until my skin turned pink, washing away trail dirt and sweat, emerging feeling like a new person, or rather, like myself again, but with the added layer of confidence that came from having successfully navigated the wilderness alone. Over dinner, a simple but perfect meal of grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, and a glass of wine I savored after a week of instant coffee and filtered stream water, I told Derek about the trail. About the physical challenges and triumphs, the moments of doubt and determination, the encounters with wildlife and fellow hikers. "It sounds like it was exactly what you needed," he said when I had talked myself out. "I'm a little jealous, honestly." "You should be," I teased. "It was amazing. Hard, uncomfortable at times, but amazing." I reached across the table to take his hand. "Thank you for understanding why I needed to do it alone." "Of course," he said, squeezing my hand. "Though I'm hoping next time might be a we adventure rather than a you adventure." "I'd like that," I said, realizing how much I meant it. Very much. Later, curled together in my bed, which felt impossibly soft and luxurious after nights on a thin camping pad, Derek traced patterns on my bare shoulder, his touch gentle and grounding. "I missed you," he murmured against my hair. "More than I expected to." "I missed you too," I admitted, even while loving the solitude. He propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I think I'm falling in love with you, Claire." I didn't plan to say that tonight, but it's true. The words hung in the air between us, unexpected but not unwelcome. I studied his face, the earnest eyes, the slight nervousness in his expression, the vulnerability in his admission. 9 months ago, such a declaration would have terrified me, would have felt too fast, too soon after the devastation of my marriage. But now, looking up at this man who had seen me at my weakest and my strongest, who had supported my journey without trying to control it, I felt only a quiet certainty. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," I said softly. "And it scares me a little because I thought I was done with love, done with making myself vulnerable that way." "We can go as slowly as you need," he assured me, his thumb gentle on my cheek. "There's no rush." "That's just it," I said, the realization forming as I spoke it. "I don't want to go slowly out of fear. The trail taught me something important, Derek. It taught me that I'm stronger than I knew, more capable than I believed. And that includes being strong enough to risk my heart again." His smile was like sunrise, gradual and warming. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you," I said simply, not falling toward it, not approaching it cautiously. "Here now, I love you." He kissed me then, a kiss that felt like promise and passion and possibility all at once. When we came up for air, both slightly breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. "I love you too," he said, in case that wasn't clear. We lay together in comfortable silence for a while, my head on his chest, his hand stroking my hair. The familiar sounds of the city filtered through the window, cars passing, distant sirens, the occasional burst of laughter from pedestrians. After a week in the woods, these urban noises should have felt jarring, intrusive. Instead, they felt like part of a bigger whole, the complex symphony of a life fully lived. "What's next?" Derek asked eventually. "After you've conquered mountains and found love against the odds, what's the next adventure?" I smiled against his skin, thinking of all the possibilities that lay before me, before us. "I don't know exactly," I said truthfully, "but I think it involves more trails, more challenges, more moments like this." "That sounds perfect," he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. "Absolutely perfect." As Derek drifted off beside me, I remained awake a little longer, watching the play of city lights on my ceiling. My mind wandered back over the arc of the past 9 months, from the devastation of Discovery Day to this moment of contentment I couldn't have imagined then. I thought about the woman I had been before, not just the physical differences, but the way I had seen myself, the boundaries I had accepted, the limitations I had internalized. And I thought about the woman I was now, stronger in body and spirit, more aware of my worth, more willing to take risks. The journey had begun with an insult, with a casual cruelty that had cut to the quick. Fat. Such a small word to have such a large impact. At the time, it had felt like the worst thing Ava could have said, the most devastating reduction of my personhood to a single physical attribute. Now I understood that the true cruelty hadn't been the word itself, but the intention behind it, to diminish me, to render me less than, to justify Michael's betrayal by suggesting I had somehow deserved it through the sin of taking up too much space in the world. My response, losing 50 pounds, transforming my body, had initially been driven by anger, by a desire to prove her wrong, to show up and shock her with my metamorphosis. But somewhere along the way, the motivation had shifted. The weight loss had become not about her, not about Michael, not even about revenge, but about me. About reclaiming my health, my strength, my confidence. About choosing my own path forward, rather than letting their actions define my future. And in that shift lay the true victory. Not in Ava's tears when I confronted her, not in Michael's regretful acknowledgement of what he had lost, but in my own liberation from the need for their validation or remorse. I had lost 50 pounds, yes, but I had gained immeasurably more. Self-respect, inner strength, new love, new purpose, new horizons. I had discovered that transformation isn't a destination but a journey, one that continues long after the number on the scale stops changing, one that involves heart and mind as much as body. As I finally drifted toward sleep, Derek's steady breathing beside me a comforting rhythm, I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. Whatever challenges came next, and life would surely bring more, I would face them with the knowledge that I was equal to them, that I contained within myself everything needed to not just survive but thrive. In the darkness of my bedroom, far from the wilderness trail that had taught me so much but close to the heart that now beat in sync with mine, I made a silent promise to myself, to never again make myself small to accommodate someone else's limitations, to take up exactly as much space as I needed, no more, no less. To live fully, love deeply, and walk my path with courage and conviction. 50 pounds lighter, immeasurably stronger, I closed my eyes and surrendered to sleep, certain only of one thing: the journey ahead would be uniquely, gloriously mine.